Thank you, Lindsay, for that wonderful introduction. I was recently asked by an Indianapolis Star reporter to answer a very simple question. What would it take for a woman to become president? Well, quite frankly, there are many studies out there that try to answer that very question. And they seem to come back to the following 5 recommendations. Women candidates should demonstrate proven executive experience, be able to talk about crime, taxes, and the economy, use active language and tough statements, appear formal, warm, and friendly, and own your ambition. Simple. The problem is that women have been communicating in these ways for years, but we've still not been elected to the highest offices in this country or around the world. Quite frankly, we're not doing very well when it comes to representative offices either. In this country, we just hit a new high. 20% of the seats in the United States Congress are held by women. Only 18 women hold seats as the head of state or government worldwide. So maybe we're asking the wrong questions. When we ask, what must a woman do, that assumes that we've been doing something wrong for the nearly 150 years that we have officially declared our candidacies for the highest office in this country. The problem isn't the women running. It's us. It's you, and it's me. In this country, we have trouble imagining a woman as president. Just the fact that I have to use the word woman as a modifier for president should tell you something about the current state of normal in our country. We can't even talk in ways that suggest that women are just as viable candidates as men for the presidency. We can't do it for the level of governorship. We can't even do it for the Indianapolis mayor. What's wrong with us? Well, it's communication. Yes, it's communication. I've had the privilege of talking with several women who have served as state governors around the country. My mother, who is not a governor but is my biggest fan, told many of her friends that I had this opportunity. When I had interviewed the governor of Arizona, my mother told her friend that I had done this, and my mother's friend's response was, "What did he say? What did he say?" Now this illustrates more than just the fact that my mother's friend didn't happen to know who was the Arizona governor at the time. It illustrates a much larger challenge. It illustrates the norm. It illustrates what's assumed. How do we talk about political leadership generally and the individuals who fill those seats specifically? What is unspoken in our choice of words that defines the expectations of the office? When we begin to answer those questions, we'll be one step closer to reframing normal in politics. The United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, names 2 requirements for the president. Natural-born citizen, 35 years of age. Nowhere does the Constitution say that the president must be a white male or even a man, yet those expectations have been communicated by us ever since George Washington became the first president of our country. By that communication, I mean, how have the presidents behaved, how have their opponents behaved, and what stories have we told about them? In other words, the verbal and nonverbal communication about the presidency has defined the presidency, not the Constitution. So how have we talked the presidency into being? What are those unspoken norms that we take for granted in our political culture? Well, historically, our presidents have been military heroes. So let's ask a question. Why is lack of military experience perceived as a weakness during a presidential campaign. Until recently, women could never have demonstrated military experience, and doing so is still quite controversial today. Even men who lack military experience are often portrayed as lacking some necessary quality by their opponents. It's not required by the Constitution, but we have talked military experience into a norm of the presidency. Consider that presidential candidates have communicated independent, tough, strong, and rugged personas during their campaigns. So let's ask another question. What is required for effective governing once in office? Certainly strength and toughness might be important qualifications, but maybe there are other qualities that might be important to the office as well. What about collaboration and cooperation in our era of divided government? Yet why is weak the only alternative that we can imagine to tough and strong? Sometimes the solution provided to women seems overly simple. All you have to do is talk or act like a man. But we know that doesn't work either. History books have concluded that women who have tried to do that are strange, they're odd, they're unruly, they're overly ambitious, or they're just plain bitchy. In other words, it's not one or the other, yet we talk as if it is. Our language system sets up hierarchies and dichotomies that limit our thinking. Hot or cold, right or wrong, masculine or feminine, black or white, but we sure do live in a lot of the gray. And that's not a bad thing. We need to move beyond this two-choice logic of independence and toughness or dependence and softness. Let's start talking in ways that take advantage of the range of possibilities. The reality is that the range of possibilities illustrates qualities that we all possess, citizens and leaders, men and women. Just like this, just like we can all cross our arms both ways. Go ahead, try it. We can all cross our arms both ways, but one feels more comfortable, one feels natural, one feels normal. But both are possibilities and should remind us that there are not just two, but a range of options that will help us reframe normal. Let me ask a few more questions. Why is George Washington called the father of our country? Why do we expect the president to be married and a father? We call the president's spouse the First Lady. What would we call that spouse when that executive is a woman? And why is that such a hard question to answer? Let me review some political campaign strategies with you for a few more insights. In 1840, William Henry Harrison's manly virtues were a stark contrast to Martin Van Buren's ruffled shirts. Harrison defeated Van Buren. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was portrayed as the rail splitter, the tough, strong, populist man of the people. Theodore Roosevelt was a war hero in the Spanish-American War and was fond of outdoors, strenuous activities such as hunting, hiking, fishing, and shooting, which fueled his manly presidential persona. John F. Kennedy claimed in the 1960 campaign that the country under the previous administration had gone soft, mentally, spiritually, physically soft, in contrast to his toughness. Ronald Reagan and later George W. Bush were portrayed as those rugged cowboys, fond of outdoors activities like chopping wood, riding horses, and other manly presidential pursuits. In 1988, George H.W. Bush portrayed Michael Dukakis as soft on crime and untrustworthy in the now famous Willie Horton ad. Bush was no longer the wimp. He won the election. Even Bill Clinton, who had no military experience on which to campaign, often used the language of football, positioning himself as the tough coach who would lead the country to victory. What do all of the losing candidates have in common? What are the characteristics that have been created by our language? What are the characteristics that have created the norm of the loser, and then by contrast, the image of the winner? Soft, unmanly, ruffly, not very athletic, not outdoorsy, not physically strong, untrustworthy. Did I say soft? Why is the less desired candidate talked about in feminine terms, or terms that have historically disadvantaged female political figures? Why is the winning candidate always manly? Why do we appear afraid of characteristics deemed feminine when it comes to executive-level political offices? Remember what I said earlier. We all demonstrate a range of characteristics, masculine and feminine. Our leaders do as well. We can all cross our arms both ways. We have simply talked ourselves into believing that one is more valued. One is the norm. The reality is that a range of qualities are required for successful governing. But if the less desired candidate is talked about in feminine terms, or terms that have historically disadvantaged female candidates, while at the same time criticized because those same characteristics communicate a lack of presidential manliness, we've got to change the conversation. When we change the conversation, we have changed our way of thinking. When we change our way of thinking, we will be able to imagine a woman as president. That's what has to happen in order to elect our first female president. Listen to political talk and talk about political talk. Question the norm. Does the norm reflect the reality? Does the norm reflect what we want our children to hear? Talk as if talk matters, because it does. To reframe normal and raise a generation in which women and men, in which our participation as human beings is considered normal at all levels of politics, remember this: you can cross your arms both ways. Thank you.